No, I'm not concerned that they're going up. I mean, they reflect that there are greater responsibilities on the director of a public company, and they're everything from continuous disclosure to much more personal liability. So at the end of the day, I'm not terribly surprised.
Shouldn't potential shareholders, get a chance to vote on performance though?
Well, effectively the government is doing that. I mean, those fees have to be approved by the board, but I mean, they're in line with what we see with other private companies.
We've also heard that a minimum parcel of shares could be around $1,000. Do you think that's fair for New Zealanders? I mean, how many Kiwis will actually have $1,000? Putting aside, obviously, that some will go in through KiwiSaver.
So the decision hasn't been made yet what the minimum parcel would be, but the point of concern would be if the amount was too low, then the transaction fees could outweigh the benefits of owning the shares. So there's a point where a reasonable size parcel is required. Conventional wisdom is $1,000 is about that sort of point, but that decision hasn't finally been made yet. What we are going to make sure, though, is that access to buying those shares is made as easy as possible for New Zealanders, and there'll be lots of options to make sure that it's done in a low-cost way, an accessible way, and they understand what they're doing. The decision to either buy or not buy those shares is something that New Zealanders need to get their own advice on. But we will try and make the process as simple as possible,
that includes banks,
including potentially being able to go into your bank and potentially through the internet as well.
How will the energy companies pay for this increase in directors' fees?
Oh, look, they make hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I mean, realistically, you're talking about directors' fees that go up by about $190,000, and they reflect much bigger responsibilities. I mean, the point of taking these companies into the mixed ownership model is to allow them to potentially explore other opportunities which may be available to those companies where they may make greater revenue over time. Now, whether they do it or don't, again, is a matter for those directors and for the company itself. But there's no question that they'll have more responsibilities and more concerns to deal with, I guess, as ultimately a privately held.
But are you satisfied that the board of Mighty River, all the SOEs were asked to write to the Minister by the end of February with the immediate expectation, setting out all of the challenges they faced for the upcoming year, and that's particularly important for those that are facing being partially sold. Mighty River Power is the only SOE not to have replied. Doesn't that a failure on the board?
We don't know the answer. You have to take that with the SOE minister.
So, Simon, you'll be able to buy shares over the internet, did you just say?
Yeah, it's possible. That will be one way of accessing that. We're going through all the final details, so we won't get too much ahead of ourselves. But the aim here is to have as many New Zealanders participate as we want to, and as is practically possible. So the government will certainly be trying to honour its commitment of having Kiwi mums and dads at the front of the queue. Now, there's lots of ways that New Zealanders might want to buy, everything from obviously through their KiwiSaver account or on their behalf through the super fund or ACC. But directly being able to buy a parcel of shares in the most convenient, low-cost way is one of the ways the government's having a good look.
And how the sales, are you still confident that it's going to be a popular share issue?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you take the Herald on Sunday's research in the weekend, I haven't seen the basis of the company, the polling company, but what they showed was, about 60% of people are opposed. They also showed 60% of New Zealanders actually want to buy the shares. What they also showed was National's polling numbers were above election night. I think that gives you a bit of an indication. This has been a well-rehearsed argument we've had now for really the better part of the last 18 months. And I think over the course of time, New Zealanders will get an opportunity to see whether they think there's merit in the program, which means that the government can buy new assets. It doesn't have to add more debt. It can potentially get better performance out of these companies and can broaden out the stock market. And I think having those advantages there are significant for New Zealand.
So despite the well-rehearsed argument, do you think there's still a case that some New Zealanders don't understand some of the complexities around what's going on, or some of the...
Well, some of the research I've seen shows that New Zealanders have a very low level of understanding when it comes to what's actually happening through the mixed ownership model. One survey that I saw, 81% of New Zealanders couldn't name that Mighty River Power is actually the first company that will be taken to the market. 90% of those New Zealanders hadn't owned shares before. Significant portion didn't really know what was going on. About 80 to 90% didn't know the government was retaining 51% of the companies. So there's not necessarily a high level of understanding, even though these debates have been well rehearsed through the media during the election campaign and here in Parliament. I think New Zealanders will get a better understanding of this program when they actually see the companies brought to market, and when they see that the day after a mixed ownership model float, in fact the sun will come up. and the company looked very much like Air New Zealand.
So you're confident you've got a mandate here, even though by your own admissions, a lot of Kiwis, or 81% of people couldn't name the company?
No, couldn't name the company. No.
Even though people don't really know what it's about by their own admission?
Well, they know the issue. I mean, the issue was front and centre stage during the election. And at the end of the day, if we're going to have an election campaign, we're going to have major issues like this as the preeminent issue during the election campaign. The one particular party is going to get the biggest result in MMP history, and then the opposition are going to claim that they don't have a moral mandate. Well, I think that's a bit arrogant actually on the part of those other political parties. I mean, at the end of the day, either we have an election or we're not having an election. If we're having an election, it's front and centre stage. And I mean, what do I say to the million odd New Zealanders that voted for National, and this was one of our core policies, if I don't follow through with them?
Just on the internet.
What it is that they voted for?
Well, they understand the overall theme of what we're doing, which is buying more assets without any more debt.
Just going back to buying the shares online, how would that work exactly? Would it be through internet banking, or would it be a separate website?
Yeah, working our way through all of those things, but all I can say is we've been very focused on our commitment, which is to make sure that New Zealanders are at the front of the queue, mums and dads get the best opportunity to buy that they practically can if they wish to, and that we do that in the lowest cost way possible.
So
the other details we're working through.
When will these shares go on the market?
We don't know that exactly yet. I mean, obviously the next step is the passing of the legislation that will happen today. There is litigation risk always in the Maori Council, obviously threatening action, so that's always a possibility that will slow up the process. But we're working our way through all of those issues as best we can.